keep a safe distance of 6 feet from others.
There's the side of me that say, this is very science fiction.
I feel like I've seen this movie.
I feel the same way, but at the same time, it's reality. It's our
Due to the mature nature of this content, language, and depth, viewer discretion is advised.
And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand, or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name.
In a recent speech, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel is developing technology to fight COVID-19.
Technology that we haven't activated until today, technologies that are accepted according to the law, we will activate them. That means maybe new methods that we are currently working on. I also spoke to our technology heads that they would look for all kinds of means that the state of Israel is really good at.
One of those technologies would include sensors.
There would be one on everyone, every person, every child.
I don't think we've ever had a moment where people are willing to say, okay, you can use my phone to identify every person I've been near, and I'm okay with that. That is new. But everything about coronavirus is new.
This contact tracing technology is not yet widely used in the U.S. And so far, it's up to you to download an app and share your details.
In his hand.
Like touch it?
Yeah.
Oh,
weird. Yeah, it's like a grain of rice.
Yeah, a grain of rice.
Embedded in his hand is a microchip that serves as his keys, his ID, and his wallet.
Plexiglass between customers and cashiers, and no cash will be allowed.
Many try to examine their everyday lives, especially when it comes to touching credit cards or cash.
Cashless options are fantastic for people because you don't have to touch as many things.
Justifying a cashless society on the basis of that you can pass viruses on through it. They're going to be saying, we can't have this again. We can't have this happen again. So you're going to have more technological testing of people for whether they have a temperature and all this stuff. And the whole surveillance is going.
To slow the spread of the coronavirus, some governments are tracking citizens with the help of apps, drones, and other high-tech methods. But critics warn the surveillance may go too far. Roxana Saberi in London has been looking into the measures.
In China, a drone picks out perpetrators in public, ordering this man to wear a mask. In South Korea, special cameras expose anyone with a fever. And in Tunisia, a police robot questions suspected violators of the country's lockdown.
Let's keep Singapore healthy. For your own safety and for those around you, please stand at least 1 meter apart. Thank you. Let's keep Singapore healthy. For your own safety and for those around you, please safety and for those around you, please stand at least 1 meter apart.
Ecco qual è il modo per far applicare le norme. Non si esce. Questo è l'ordine del sindaco De Luca e basta. Non si esce da casa. Del bambino, del bambino. Non si esce. Questo è l'ordine del sindaco De Luca e basta. Dove cazzo vai? Torna a casa.
Well, governments globally are enacting strict measures to contain the coronavirus, raising questions about individual freedoms and privacy rights during a pandemic. Israel has given its security agencies the power to track the mobile data of people suspected of having the virus. The government will use the information to force them into quarantine and warn those who've come into contact with them. South Korea has taken similar steps by using mobile phone and satellite technology to track potential carriers. Ali Funk is a researcher for the watchdog Freedom House. She says strict measures must be put in place to ensure people's privacy isn't at risk once the pandemic is over.
We know from a public health perspective, it can be beneficial to track infected or potentially infected people. But what we're really concerned about is that this location tracking, the health-related information is going to be used for other purposes, particularly by governments who are using surveillance to track down activists or human rights defenders or journalists or even opposition figures. So if this information has to be collected, which I think in order to justify the collection, we have to ensure that it is scientifically supported as a way to protect public health. We need to ensure that the restrictions are as narrow as possible. So then when we get out of this, our privacy protections are still there.
Speech, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel is developing technology to fight COVID-19.
Technology that we haven't activated until today, technologies that are accepted according to the law, we will activate them. That means maybe new methods that we are currently working on. I also spoke to our technology heads that they would look for all kinds of means that the state of Israel is really good at.
One of those technologies would include sensors.
There would be one on everyone, every person, every child. First of all, regarding children, there would be a sensor like a car. You get too close, it makes a noise like a buzzer. I don't know if this is possible. We're checking this. We're trying this. But we can, through different means, guard against the transmission of corona.
The technology could be compared to what's used in Mobileye for cars that warns about the danger of getting too close to other vehicles or pedestrians. But the Prime Minister quickly faced criticism. A cyber resilience expert told a major Israeli publication, while she understood the idea in theory, it wouldn't work for humans. It would not pass any practical or legal test. Another concern, who would use the information from the sensors? During the lockdown, the government also approved digital tracking of phones of those who contracted the coronavirus. Later, Israel's High Court said the country needed to pass legislation to regulate such tracking. The controversy came as Israel continues to lift its restrictions. Malls, gyms, and markets are allowed to reopen with temperature checks and social distancing protocols.
The state of California is training thousands of people to perform contact tracing to help contain the spread of the coronavirus. It's time-consuming and labor-intensive work. Tech companies like Apple and Google are also jumping in to help. KPIX5's Devin Feely explains the uses and potential abuses of high-tech contact tracing.
Apple and Google, who've cornered a combined 95% of the U.S. cell phone market, announced a partnership to use their phones to pinpoint if you've come in contact with someone who's tested positive for the virus.
When your phone is near another phone or of somebody else's, it's able to create a record of that connection. So instead of just going by where you are geographically, it's looking to see whose phones are near each other.
Alex Hammerstone is the head of risk management for TrustedSec, a cybersecurity company. He says because the phones are recording who you've been in contact with instead of everywhere you go, it should ease concerns about privacy at least a little. But he says the safeguards built into the system.
In the small town of Westport, Connecticut, a drone is scanning for COVID-19 symptoms. And the reaction here is, well, mixed. Police have been flying drones here since 2016 for everything from traffic management to search and rescue. And they can use them to spot and warn people who are gathered too closely. But now, Dragonfly, the company that makes the drones, claims they can also detect whether you're running a fever, sneezing, or coughing heavily, all through a single camera flying 40 feet overhead.
Subtle differences are on like a millimeter type of basis. So if somebody's coughing, like this or like this, it's actually quite a different type of cough actually that they're detecting.
The police chief says this partnership could help the town reopen, and they need every tool possible.
In a pandemic, we'll see the elevated temperatures, we'll see the increase in blood pressure, we'll see the flushed skin. So to have the technology available for future incidents, whether it be COVID-related or something else that comes our way, I think we need to prepare for that.
This is the first time Americans have been scanned for symptoms in this way, and there are skeptics.
I don't know that this technology could distinguish between somebody with COVID-19 and somebody with influenza. I'm inclined to doubt it.
Not to mention that many infected people never exhibit obvious symptoms. And even if it does work, are we ready to be scanned from the air?
The involvement of the police makes me more worried about how this technology might have what we sometimes call function creep, in that it is used and designed for one purpose, but then it gets repurposed for other things.
Do you believe that we're going to have to strike some kind of necessary compromise with the desire for privacy in order to get out of this thing?
Public health has built into it the need sometimes to invade people's privacies.
The chief says it's all just research, but the police will see and save everything.
By no means will we single out an individual and say, hey, look, you look like your temperature is elevated.
Will you be hanging on to data that Dragonfly is collecting, or does that somehow go around you?
Any missions, so to speak, that we fly with our drones, we keep those records.
The ACLU of Connecticut responded this week saying that any new surveillance measure that isn't being advocated for by public health professionals and restricted solely for public health use should be promptly rejected. Is this the kind of thing we'll have to use in order to gather in public again?
Do we really want to be entering into convention centers if they don't have a health monitoring system that can give us an indication or a reading of what is the potential risk?
Keep a safe distance of 6 feet from others.
There's the side of me that say, this is very science fiction.
I feel like I've seen this movie.
I feel the same way, but at the same time, it's reality. It's our new reality.
Technology to slow the spread of the coronavirus. Some governments are tracking citizens with the help of apps, drones, and other high-tech methods. But critics warn the surveillance may go too far. Roxana Saberi in London has been looking into the measures.
In China, a drone picks out perpetrators in public, ordering this man to wear a mask. In South Korea, special cameras expose anyone with a fever. And in Tunisia, a police robot questions suspected violators of the country's lockdown. All high-tech tools designed to slow the spread of COVID-19.
I had to fill out a form, putting in my address, my ID number, and all that for them to track me.
Milo Shia, a student at American University in Washington, D.C., says when he flew home to Taiwan last month, authorities told him to quarantine at home for 2 weeks.
They verbally told me that, your phone will be satellite tracked.
He just didn't realize how closely.
My phone ran out of battery for about 15 minutes. I plugged it in. But by then, there was already 2 police officers knocking at my door.
What do you think about that level of tracking and enforcement?
Some of my friends think it's perfectly fine. At the same time, it's a little scary knowing that, they have this capability.
It's a concern raised by privacy advocates like Estelle Massey.
Government do need data to fight the spread of the virus, but knowing at what time I go to the shop if I'm not infected, knowing who I may be meeting here is not relevant.
The extent of surveillance varies from country to country. In Europe, voluntary apps track people's symptoms, and this one in Israel even alerts users if they've come into contact with someone who's infected. Now, Google and Apple say they're building similar contact tracing technology into smartphones, a move President Trump says his administration is looking into. Already, U.S. officials are turning to tech companies to tap into people's digital data to see if they're practicing social distancing. Here in London, for example, data gathered by Google shows where the UK's lockdown is working. Visits to shops are down 84%, to workplaces 61%. But visits to parks, where police have had to send sunbathers home, have dropped only 15%.
That is very useful data, and it is very easy to keep that anonymous. The next step would be when the government starts to track individuals. We don't know when that will happen.
CBS News contributor Nick Thompson.
How unprecedented is this use of technology?
I don't think we've ever had a moment where people are willing to say, okay, you can use my phone to identify every person I've been near, and I'm okay with that. That is new. But everything about coronavirus is new.
This contact tracing technology is not yet widely used in the U.S. And so far, it's up to you to download an app and share your details. Now, these tools are useful, but as they become more widespread, they'll raise
There's been a lot of talk about China's high-tech fight against coronavirus. Robots delivering food in hospitals, facial recognition cameras taking people's temperatures, and drones enforcing lockdowns and quarantines.
But
what about the tech we can't see? China's sophisticated and controversial data surveillance system is used to track citizens on and offline.
健康码运用大数据监控后台大数据精密自控
And it's proving extremely effective during the pandemic. The mass surveillance network has taken the Communist Party decades to build. They've faced near constant criticism for it around the world. But as the world tries to get a grip on COVID-19, many countries are looking to the model for answers. Here's how they're doing it in South Korea.
They're using your phone to locate where you are, and then they'll send you an emergency alert if you're anywhere near where a confirmed coronavirus patient has been.
Singapore, Israel, Iran, Taiwan, and Russia have all adopted some or all of the Chinese methods to temporarily harness the power of data. More are expected to follow. So how does China's data surveillance system work, and how is it useful in a pandemic? It all starts with this, a national ID card. You need one to pretty much do anything in China. From buying a mobile phone to using any app, everything you do leaves a data trail linked back to your ID. In areas in lockdown, phone location data is being used to monitor movement and enforce curfews. If a patient is meant to be in quarantine, geolocation pings on their phone can alert authorities if they stray out of their homes. Phone location data is also being used to map exactly where that person visited in the 2 weeks before being diagnosed. A combination of human and automated computer analysis work out who they may have infected. If they went on a train and got too close to other commuters, a text message is sent out through one of the major apps, alerting those at risk. Every person is being assigned a coloured QR code depending on the risk they pose. Green, no risk. Orange, they've entered a potential virus hotspot. And red, if they've tested positive for the virus and could still be contagious.
It's about the future of department stores. It's starting to take shape as Nordstrom unveils the changes they're making to help protect their workers and shoppers. Eva Pilgrim has the details from Nordstrom in New York. Good morning, Eva.
Good morning, George. This brand new flagship Nordstrom is shifting its role from shopping center to fulfillment location. It's part of the evolving changes as Nordstrom prepares to reopen.
Stores are reopening, but shopping as we know it is changing. Nordstrom announcing the closure of 16 stores in an effort to weather the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, while also putting precautions into place as it gets ready to open back its stores across the country. This Nordstrom Rack in Greenville, South Carolina is reopening today. The company planning a location-by-location approach, not opening all stores at once.
So remember our priorities: 6 feet away from everyone. Make sure we're smiling with our eyes. Make sure we're taking care of that customer.
As the stores open, customers can expect shortened hours to make time for additional cleaning. There will be a limit on the number of customers allowed inside to allow for social distancing. Masks will be handed out to all employees and customers. Fewer fitting rooms will be open and they will be cleaned between uses. Any merchandise that is tried on will be held for a period of time before it goes back to the rack. At the registers, plexiglass between customers and cashiers, and no cash will be allowed.
This little guy before. His name is Spot, and he's Boston Dynamics' first commercially available robot. And while we've seen it strutting its stuff up and down stairs and doing things like opening doors, now man's best robo-friend is helping out in a new way by ensuring social distancing guidelines. This is a park in Singapore, a country that, despite early praise for their efforts to curb the coronavirus pandemic, has recently seen an uptick in outbreaks, now with the most cases in all of Southeast Asia, which is why they've unleashed Spot to help decrease the manpower required to patrol public.
keep Singapore healthy. For your own safety and for those around you, please stand at least 1 meter apart. Thank you. Keep Singapore healthy. For your own safety and for those around you, please stand at least 1 meter apart. Thank you. Let's keep Singapore healthy. For your own safety and for those around you, please stand at least 1 meter apart. Thank you. Let's keep Singapore healthy. For your own safety and for those around you, please safety and for those around you, please stand at least 1 meter apart. Thank you.